I am Sam from The Strength Therapist, and today we're going to be talking about groin strains. I received a few questions about having some upper groin pain, particularly after an activity, whether it was ranging from cutting in a sport or deadlifting. Having groin pain is not an incredibly uncommon situation to arise, particularly in athletics, things like soccer, hockey, notoriously for having groin injuries. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through a few different exercises that are going to be addressing the length, the strength, and also some supporting musculature that might be involved in the reason that you experience that groin strain. Depending upon what you mean when you say groin, we can have a ranging number of tissues involved, but generally we're looking at something in this region. The musculature here originates on the pelvis and then attaches onto the femur, this leg bone generally. That's an important consideration because we want to have, number one, a sufficient amount of range to utilize that muscle through. And if we put ourselves in a position that we call anterior pelvic tilt, where I am in here, this can often challenge the position of different structures. And so we want to look at having a fairly neutral pelvis position, and that way there's not a big tug of war with some of the other musculature we're going to talk about in a moment. So what you can first check out is, if I were to look at my belt line ideally is going to be relatively straightforward. But if you find that your belt buckle points downwards, that's going to be a position of anterior pelvic tilt. And so as you're going through your daily activities, you can think about working on some pelvic positioning, so that way you're not putting your groin in a greater amount of strain from that. So the interventions, what can we do for it? The first thing that we're going to want to do is, number one, calm things down. That's always going to be the first suggestion we give to people, because if things are very heightened and elevated, it's not going to really be very tolerable to stress that we're going to introduce. The first thing you want to do is give it a little bit of rest. If you just strained your groin in an activity, if you're playing hockey and you really went to go push off, cut, and you felt a huge strain, well, that's going to be something that we're not going to want to start loading initially. We're going to want to give it a few days of rest at first. After you've done that period of calming things down, we're going to then go over and we're going to start doing some things to work on addressing some length. The first thing that we'll suggest is giving some options of some foam roller activities. This is by no means going to be an amazing fix, but it can help to decrease some of the tone you might be perceiving at the moment. So we're going to show you two different options for that. With a foam roller, what we can do is we can get into a position where we're face down, and then I'm going to be laying on my stomach. I'm going to have my leg on top of the roller with it lifted up quite high. I'm going to turn face down, and I'm just going to roll across. I've got my other hip lifted up, and now I can come across the whole way. I can find a position where I feel a little bit of tension. I can go through a few knee extensions. I can turn my hip up and down and go through those motions. Another option is the higher groin region. What I can do is I can put a roller on a box or some sort of other thing to heighten the level, and then I can come in and get across, and then I can sit on it in essence. I can work on leaning forward, leaning back. This will be a little bit more hamstrings and adductor magnus. By leaning forward, it'll be a little more of the other adductor muscles, the pectineus, the adductor longus, and brevis. Doing that for about 20 to 30 seconds on each side before we get into these more challenging range of motion exercises is going to be beneficial at times, especially if you're feeling a lot of tension in that region. The next thing that we're going to do is start to show those range of motion exercises. So the first one we're going to go through is a split stance adductor mob, and that's just where we're going to be then in a position on one knee with the other leg straight out, and we're going to be working on going through flexion and extension while keeping the leg out to the side and in a lengthened position on the adductors. So I'm going to be on my knees, I'm going to put my hands down, and I'm going to straighten one leg out to the side. From here I can work on sitting back. That's going to lengthen out some of the more flexing ones. And then as I come forward and as I sit back, that's going to lengthen out more of the extensor ones. As I come forward, that'll lengthen out more of the flexor ones. I'm going to be here, I can sit back and come forward. Some individuals will find that is very hamstring focused, and so another variation where we bend the knee to release some tension on the hamstrings is called a frog, and then we can also do the frog 2.0, and this is going to be then working on some rotation as well. So again, I'm going to be on my knees, I'm going to come forward into a quadruped position. I can take my knees wider, and then I can play around with the foot positioning as I find comfortable. And again, I'm going to come forward, or come back into seated, and then come forward into some extension, going through these. As I continue on, I feel better with this, I might add some rotation. So I might come forward, and I might lift one foot up, sit back down, Create some rotation from side to side. This will put this side into some internal rotation, and this side into some external rotation. The next ones we're going to do are a little bit more dynamic. These are where we're going to be up on our feet, and we're going to start to really challenge not only the length of the tissue, but also some resiliency in it to be able to be nice and strong and sturdy. The first option that we're going to do is just a basic lateral lunge. So we're going to stand off to one side, we're going to have our feet together, and we're going to step out to the side, keeping one leg straight. So on this straight side, we're going to keep that knee locked, and we're going to sit back, load up this leg. So in this position right now, these adductors are being loaded, challenged to support me in a position of stability. Well, these ones are being lengthened out and challenged for the range of motion. And I can press back up. This leg will help to assist in pulling me over, again, working on some strength as well, but really a big range of motion challenge. So I can go through 5 to 10 repetitions per side and work on getting some back, I can do about 5 to 10 repetitions of this. It's a good way to get some graded exposure to the movement again, especially if that's what you experienced when you were, the activity you were doing, when you experienced the onset of these symptoms. The next one we're going to go to is called a Cossack Squat. This is a very similar movement, but now we're going to add in some additional rotation in the one side. That's going to challenge some of the adductors to work on some rotation, while also being additionally lengthened. So what we're going to do here is the same thing where we're standing off to one side, take a nice step, and then as I sink down, this is going to do the exact same things. This foot I'm going to have turned to the roof. And then come back up. That was our lengthening series, the ones that we're going to utilize to get more comfortable with some range of motion and really challenge the tissue to elongate and be comfortable with that. If you're not able to handle that yet, you want to give it more time to recover, do very simple exercises. Doing some of the range of motion on the table that I showed, those are very easy. Those are typically not going to be too provocative. Just don't push into any sort of pain. The next step we're going to work on is now strengthening. So we're going to take you through a few different options for helping to strengthen up the groin. Our first option is going to be in a position where we're sidelining, and what we're going to do is get down to our shoulder, be nice and stacked. We're going to take the top leg, move it out of the way, and now we're going to start to raise that leg up, that bottom leg. This is called adduction, and this is using the groin or the adductor muscles to lift the leg up off the table. The next thing we're going to do once we've been introducing that, along with while still doing the lateral lunges and Cossack squats, we can start to position the groin in a more challenged position. And how we're going to do this is we're going to have the feet here, and we're going to elevate one foot and require it to have an isometric contraction, so that way we're holding our position in a adducted position. So you're going to be on your side, you place one hand on your hip, and what we're going to do here is we're going to lift up. And so you can keep your down leg on the ground initially until you find that you're able to support it without. But at first we're just going to work on pushing in and challenging in this position. And this might be sufficient for some individuals, but if it's not challenging enough, we can start to lift that leg, and now we're going to hold this for time. You might start off with a few 5 to 10 second holds, maybe multiple repetitions, and then building up to 30-second intervals. Once you're able to do that well, we can then go into where we're now doing a foot elevated adduction. So it's going to be a very similar position to what we were just doing. For now, we're going to incorporate adduction on the bottom leg, so that way it's challenging the pelvis to stay in place, while we're also adducting on the other side. And so we're working on some isometric contraction with some isotonic contraction. So again, we're here, we're going to lift, straighten the leg, and then go through adduction on the bottom side. If you start to hammer those along with the lateral lunge and Cossack squat variations, that's going to be a great way to start working on strengthening of the groin region itself. You can start to add load to the lateral lunge, whether it be through a weight vest, going against a band, resisting the pull back in, or the opposite direction. You can also add dumbbells, so you're going through that motion and challenging the legs and the groin in general to get stronger and sufficient and able to handle those positions a lot better. The last thing we're going to look at is strengthening the abdominal region, particularly the rectus abdominis and external obliques. From the literature, we can see that a lot of individuals who have groin strains also have some sort of abdominal issue. It's been called a sports hernia in some circles. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you 2 exercise strategies that you can utilize to help strengthen the abdominals in a way that's going to be beneficial for this issue. The first one we're going to look at is a reverse crunch. So what we're going to do is we're going to be laying on our back, we're going to have our knees up, and we're going to start to bring the knees towards our elbows, and then we're going to lower down slowly and stop before we get into an extended position. This challenges the abdominals and the obliques to work and control the pelvis positioning and create a posterior tilt, while also getting into some lumbar flexion. This is a great way to strengthen up the abdominals and help to decrease some tension on the groin. You're going to have to hold some sort of object, whether it be a medicine ball or some sort of pillar, and then from here, we're going to bring the knees up, and we're going to bring knees to elbows and lower back down. I want to make sure that we're stopping here, not out here. While we've been doing those, in addition to the other groin stuff, the next option is to then go into a plank variation. And the one that we're going to recommend particularly is a hard style plank. And that's where we're going to be getting to a bit of a longer position, having our arms up in front of us slightly more. And we're also going to be having a very aggressive glute squeeze and abdominal brace. And that way it creates a bit more of a posterior tilt. And from there, we're going to work on controlling that position. We'll link supplementary videos in the article that's going to accompany this, and that'll go through all of the videos for these exercises in a bit more thorough detail. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us. Again, I am Sam from The Strength Therapist. You can contact me by thestrengththerapist@gmail.com or through any of the social media things that we have. Move well, lift heavy, stay healthy.